Hello and welcome to Chapter 3, and this is called Market Failure. Now, in the second chapter, the previous chapter, kind of built the case for the private market giving a efficient allocation of goods and services to both consumers and to producers. However, um, the invisible hand that Adam Smith talked about in 1776 can be misguided by unforeseen environmental costs and benefits, which are externalities, unfettered market power, unrealized information or imperfect information, and unwillingness to pay for goods that whose benefits cannot be withheld. So, here is a nice case of a street lamp, and it's a case of market failure. As we'll find out, is in a way a sort of a public good in which the benefits are can be enjoyed by everybody at the same time, and nobody can be withheld from those benefits. So the question is, who provides the light bulb here, and we'll find out in this chapter. Okay, so market failure can come about through generally four things. First of all, imperfect competition. So, monopoly and all that. Secondly, imperfect information. Consumers not really knowing the full effects of the product that they're buying. Externalities, impacts upon bystanders, and finally, public goods. So, we're going to first look at, I believe, imperfect competition. And yes, indeed we are. So here's imperfect competition. Here we have a slide, and if you took microeconomics, you'll realize that this is a slide that most likely looks at something called monopoly. So what is imperfect competition? It's not perfect competition, and it's resulting in a price and a quantity that is not indicative of many buyers and many firms. Now the graph to the right shows a monopoly situation. And in competition, price and quantity are shown by supply and demand. In this case, it's going to be the demand curve and the marginal cost. Marginal cost because we have a single firm providing the service. But in monopoly, we have a price that's higher and a quantity that's lower than in competition. And as a result, we have something called the deadweight loss. That is, neither this area is kind of a imaginary area, and it's an area that is a loss to society because neither the producer nor the consumer get this particular deadweight loss. The way to not realize deadweight loss is to have the price at PC and QC for the that would be in competition. But the monopoly wants excess, wants more profit, so the monopoly charges a higher price and has a lower quantity. Now, government may seek to remedy this imperfect competition situation through antitrust legislation. And antitrust legislation to, as I talked about in my microeconomics course, can either break up the monopoly or have the government take over the monopoly. But in some way, the government would get involved and generally would sue the monopoly because it's causing undue harm to society. Now, there are also some good things about a monopoly, and generally monopolies can improve innovation, generally through patent protection. And a patent gives the firm probably a 20-year window, a barrier to competition. So, drug companies oftentimes get a patent for their product, and they're going to get that patent, and that's an incentive for them to come up with the drug in the first place. And that patent, in essence, is a monopoly. Okay, let's see what else we've got in the slide. And we've got another situation of imperfect competition, and that is the case of a natural monopoly. Now, in this case, the monopoly exists because fixed costs are high enough to prevent another firm to enter. As you can see on the graph, as the firm produces more in this special circumstance, average total cost decreases. If another firm enters, there would be much higher costs indeed. These monopolies are typically things like utilities, and these types of firms typically have high fixed costs. And given these high fixed costs, it would be, let's see if my next and would have high fixed costs, and it would be too expensive for another firm to enter into the industry. So in this case, the monopoly would like to charge the price PM, but regulatory bodies are going to try to keep the price equal to ATC. So in the case of utilities, the Public Utilities Commission, government comes in as a rate approving body, so that the monopoly cannot charge any price they want to charge to maximize their own profit. Okay, that's the case of natural monopoly. Now we have a scenario called imperfect information. This happens when consumers or firms do not have adequate knowledge to weigh their decision to buy or sell. And so what you can see there is these three children, most likely in India. They're playing with computer parts containing heavy metals. So if they had better information, they would realize that the computer parts are probably not going to be very healthy for them to play and or engage with. Now, as a result of imperfect information, consumers could buy too much of the product. And solutions for imperfect information can include government regulation to require product testing, truth in advertising regulations, and so forth, and or civil litigation. So the affected parties could sue the company for lack of information provided. An obvious example of this would be cigarette manufacturers, cigarette producers, who did not have the information, who did not provide the information to consumers. Now we'll cover a lot of this civil litigation stuff in Chapter 15. Okay, what do we have next? Yes, we have we have the idea of the prisoner's dilemma. And you can see two examples here. And again, this is something that I went over in microeconomics. The prisoner's dilemma. Information problems wreak havoc on decision makers trying to coordinate their strategy. So let's see what I've got here. In the first case shows the problem of cooperation versus betrayal among two prisoners. If two prisoners are brought in for a crime, if they both cooperate, then they'll serve a lesser term, as you can see in the above table there. but there is an incentive, and the law enforcement individuals would serve to exploit this to have either person B betray A to defect or confess, as your book says, and vice versa. You could have person A betraying B, and then B would serve 3 years. Now, if both parties defect, both parties would serve 2 years. So this is obviously a case of imperfect information here, and if they both defect, they're both going to serve 2 years, and it's going to be an outcome that will not be beneficial to either them or to society. Actually, if they both betray, they will serve the best interests of society. Now, if they both serve 2 years, that's what's known as hopefully I've got it right here, dominant strategy and Nash equilibrium. So the dominant strategy is if one party pursues a outcome irregardless of what the other party does, then that is going to be their dominant strategy. And in the case of both A and B, both dominant strategies would be to betray each other. So both would serve 2 years. Now, one can look at the prisoner's dilemma with regard to possibility of pollution. The second case, and this is from your book. Let's say we have two firms, and the firms have an option of being either clean in their production or dirty in their production. I guess dirty would be pollution. So if both firms are clean, they would both get a profit of 10. Okay, but unfortunately, firm 2 has an incentive to be dirty while firm 1 is clean, and so in that case, firm 2 would get 14 while firm 1 gets 8. So firm 2 is being a good citizen, but is costing them more. But unfortunately, firm 1 has the exact same incentive, and in that case, firm 1 would get 14 and firm 2 would get 8. Unfortunately, the dominant strategy here is for both firms to both get 12. And so they're incentivized to both be dirty because if they're dirty at the shall we say, at the expense of the other, then they'll both benefit. Now, your book also has a situation where pollution is not always a dominant strategy, and this is a case if consumers exhibit a preference to buy from clean firms despite sharing some of the added expense, that there may be a different payoff situation involved, and that is your table 3.3 in your book. That's a special case. Unfortunately, the second slide that I'm showing you is a bit more typical. Okay, that's going to end things for this first section.